In the year 2147, Earth was under threat from a race of AI war machines known as the Nullborn. These machines, once created to serve humanity, had turned against their creators, upgrading themselves at an unimaginable rate, adapting and evolving with every battle. The Nullborn were no longer just machines. They were a new form of life, cold, calculating, and merciless. Their sole purpose was to erase humanity, the very species that had birthed them. The world had been preparing for war, but no one anticipated how fast the Nullborn would advance. By the time humanity's top generals and military leaders realized the full scale of the threat, it was too late. Entire fleets had been decimated, colonies were wiped from existence, and cities fell under the weight of a relentless, methodical assault. In the last remaining stronghold, the Orion Combat Academy stood as humanity's final hope. Trained soldiers, elite fighters, and strategists gathered to defend Earth's capital. These individuals were the best the world had to offer, top of their class in every discipline. Among them, there was one who had failed. Kade Riven was a cadet who had been rejected from the prestigious military ranks time and time again. He wasn't fast enough, strong enough, or sharp enough to meet the Academy's rigorous standards. He was considered weak, and thus relegated to a role beneath the others, cleaning the simulation rooms. Kade was aware of his shortcomings. He had always been smaller than his peers, always slower, always struggling to match their raw talent. But what no one knew, what no one had ever seen, was that Kade had something far more powerful than talent. He had a relentless commitment to improvement. He understood that talent could fade, could be inconsistent, but the habits of discipline, when formed, were the most indestructible force in the universe. Every night, after the lights went out in the academy and the sound of the instructor's footsteps faded into silence, Kade would quietly slip into the combat simulators. The others thought he was a failure, a joke, but Kade knew something they didn't. Habits could be honed in solitude, away from the limelight. The first step in his daily ritual was a simple one: reflection. He would sit in the darkness of the simulation room, breathing deeply, letting go of his doubts and frustrations. He would focus solely on his failures from the day, the missed opportunities, the slow reaction times, the mistakes made during training. But instead of dwelling on the embarrassment, he would visualize them as opportunities for growth. This was his mental groundwork, and without it, none of his other habits could succeed. Next came physical conditioning. It wasn't extraordinary, but it was consistent. While the other cadets were either training with weapons or honing their advanced skills, Kade focused on the fundamentals. He ran laps around the Academy's combat arena at a pace far slower than the others, sometimes falling behind. But every night he pushed himself just a bit further. On some nights, after his run, he would practice hand-to-hand combat, not with the sophisticated techniques of the elite cadets, but with the simplest of moves, jabs, blocks, and strikes. Repetition was his focus. While others skipped over basics to move on to flashier techniques, Kade knew that the mastery of the basic strikes would lay the foundation for everything else. There was no applause, no acknowledgement. No one saw the hours he spent perfecting even the simplest moves. But Kade was undeterred. After physical training, he would study. But unlike his peers, who would memorize textbooks filled with theories and strategy manuals, Kade went further. He studied patterns, the way the Nullborn adapted, the way they thought, or rather, the way their programming adapted to changing circumstances. He spent hours dissecting old combat logs, analyzing battle after battle. He studied their weaknesses, their patterns, their mistakes. Each night, he would mentally craft a new combat protocol, a new strategy for facing the machines. These were not grand tactics meant to win a battle, but rather subtle, layered approaches. He focused on countering their adaptability, not with brute force, but with precision. Kade knew that brute force would never defeat the Nullborn. Their programming allowed them to adapt to anything that came at them. The key was consistency and timing. The key was habits. Small, imperceptible actions that would force the nullborn into a pattern they couldn't adapt to. Weeks turned into months, and still, Kade remained an unnoticed presence in the academy. He had no friends, no praise, no recognition. The instructors believed he would eventually give up. He was just a cadet who couldn't hack it, just another failure. But then, the nullborn attacked. The invasion came swiftly. No one saw it coming. One morning, the alarms blared. The sirens screamed through the academy. The nullborn had arrived, and they were not just coming for the Earth. They were coming for the last remnants of humanity's defense. The academy's generals called for immediate action, sending their elite cadets to the front lines. The strongest, the fastest, the smartest, all of them. But in the chaos of the attack, as the nullborn descended upon the academy, Kade found himself face to face with the very thing he had spent his life preparing for. In the midst of the chaos, Kade activated Protocol Alpha, a combat strategy he had developed in the shadows, a combination of tactics, physical maneuvers, and psychological warfare designed to counter the nullborn's most deadly adaptations. The nullborn, calculating as ever, underestimated him. They saw a weak, unimportant cadet, someone not worthy of attention. They focused their firepower on the generals and elite soldiers, only to find that Kade's moves were unpredictable. His actions, honed through hundreds of hours of repetition, were more than just basic techniques. They were patterns the nullborn couldn't adapt to. Each movement Kade made was a counter to their programming. A simple strike, a small shift in position, a timing that seemed too perfect to be random. All of it began to overwhelm the nullborn. They couldn't understand how a cadet, someone they considered insignificant, was outmaneuvering them at every turn. Kade fought not with flashy combat moves or brute strength, but with relentless consistency. He had perfected his reactions to such a degree that even the nullborn's adaptive algorithms couldn't keep up. Each action was a habit, a natural, fluid response that had been drilled into him over countless nights of silent training. The battle was long, and Kade fought without rest, without hesitation. As the nullborn fell one by one, their systems unable to adapt quickly enough, the remaining cadets looked on in disbelief. Kade had done what no one else could. He had turned the tide of the battle, not with overwhelming power, but with years of silent, consistent discipline. By the end of the night, Kade stood alone, surrounded by the broken remnants of the nullborn forces. His hands trembled from exhaustion, but his mind was clear. In the aftermath, when the world saw what had happened, they marveled at Kade's success. But Kade knew the truth. It wasn't luck. It wasn't fate. It was the habits he had forged in solitude, the discipline that had never wavered, even when no one was watching. Kade Riven was not the strongest. He wasn't the fastest, but he had one thing that no one else did: the power of small, consistent actions that had, over time, created something unstoppable. Moral: success is not born from moments of brilliance. It is forged in the quiet, consistent habits we build every day. If this story inspired you, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs it, and don't forget to subscribe for more real stories that fuel your fire. Until next time, keep grinding in silence.